The wind carried a quiet chill that morning, the kind that whispered through trees without rattling them. I walked the same road I always did, past the corner bakery, down the hill lined with trimmed hedges, toward Tessa's little white house with the porch swing that never stayed straight. Routine felt like safety, until it didn't. Miles's car was in the driveway. His charcoal gray BMW, still streaked from last week's rain, sat like it belonged there. But he was supposed to be in D.C., consulting on that zoning project he wouldn't stop bragging about. I slowed down, unsure whether I should turn back or knock. Instead, I paused at the edge of the walkway. The blinds were drawn, but the front window wasn't latched all the way. It had a small gap near the bottom. The kind you don't notice unless you've opened and closed the same windows for 30 years. Voices slipped through, muffled but clear enough if you stood still. "As soon as she signs, we'll transfer everything over," said a woman. "The rest is just logistics." Elise, I would know her voice even if it were wrapped in static. "She won't question it," she continued. "She's tired, distracted. She's ready to be guided." My breath caught. Paperwork. Transfers. Guided, another voice, lower, maybe Miles's. I couldn't make it out. My pulse pounded too loud. I stepped back, heart heavy against my ribs, and ducked behind the hedge. I hadn't seen Tessa's car, just Miles's. Just Elise's words, slick as oil in the morning air. I backed away slowly, careful not to rustle the gravel, and crossed the street with legs that didn't feel like mine. I didn't stop until I reached my own porch, where the air no longer felt safe. Inside, I poured tea I didn't drink and sat in a silence that pressed harder than sound. I had built this life, every brick of it, and I had no idea who was trying to take it. The house creaked as I walked through it, the way old homes do when they're trying to tell you something. I moved from room to room, touching the things I once believed were permanent to the side table that still had a chip from when Miles dropped his science trophy in 6th grade, the dented cabinet drawer Tess used to climb onto to sneak cookies. I stopped at the hallway wall lined with frames. Our wedding, sunlit and simple. A photo of the kids at Myrtle Beach, sand in their eyebrows and nowhere else to be. The last one was of Miles at his university graduation, his arms wide like the world was already his. My fingers hovered near the glass, not quite touching. Everything in this house had been paid for with late nights, early mornings, and the kind of sacrifices you don't announce. You just make them. I remembered going without a new winter coat, so I could send Miles to that architecture camp in Chicago, skipping client lunches so I could afford Tessa's ballet classes. None of it felt like sacrifice back then. It felt like motherhood. But things had been off lately. 3 weeks ago, Miles had asked me if I kept the house deed in the safe or with the lawyer. He said it so casually, like he was asking about a recipe. A month before that, he'd mentioned updating my digital signature on the estate paperwork, just in case we ever need to help out fast Mom. I'd brushed it off, grateful he was thinking ahead. And then there was the time I couldn't find my bank statement folder. I thought I'd misplaced it. Now I wasn't so sure. I returned to my office and opened the desk drawer. The key to the fireproof safe was where I'd left it, tucked in the back beneath old tax forms. The deed was still there. But suddenly, its presence didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like a race I didn't know I was running. I sat down and opened my laptop. If they were planning something, I needed to find out how far it had already gone. Miles showed up late the next morning, holding a cup of vanilla chai from the cafe near the courthouse. The one he knows I like. The one he never remembers unless he's trying to impress someone. "Thought I'd swing by," he said, all brightness and easy charm. "You sounded tired on the phone yesterday." I hadn't spoken to him on the phone. He settled into the armchair across from me like it was a habit. I stayed on the edge of the couch, unsure whether I was still a mother or already a mark. He talked too much about traffic, city permits, the rising price of lumber. His hands moved constantly, adjusting his collar, tapping his cup, brushing non-existent crumbs off his knees. He wouldn't meet my eyes for longer than a blink. "You look good, Mom," he added at one point. "You've been taking care of yourself." "That's good." I smiled because I'd had practice lying too. We chatted for 20 more minutes before he glanced at his phone and stood up. "Got to run. Just wanted to check in." "Of course," I said, walking him to the door. After he left, I stood for a long time in the hallway, staring at the closed door like it had betrayed me. Then I moved to my study and opened the second drawer. The one I used for property documents, insurance, anything that needed safekeeping but not full lockup. The folder was gone, I checked the bottom filing bin. Then the cabinet. Gone. I sat at my desk and opened the banking app. I hadn't looked closely at the statements this month. I rarely needed to. But there they were. 3 small transfers, all under 500, to a secondary account I didn't recognize. The descriptions were vague. Logistics. Estate review. I didn't know what they were planning yet, but they were already moving. Quietly, legally, sloppily even. I stared at the screen, then reached for my planner. Tomorrow, I'd call someone who didn't smile when they lied. I brought lemon muffins to Tessa's house that afternoon. She opened the door with a tired smile, a smear of paint on her sleeve, and Ruthie shouting from somewhere in the back that she was almost done coloring the rainbow. Ignore the mess, Tess waved me in. We're halfway through reorganizing the art corner. Ruthie insists she's starting a gallery. The house smelled like markers and applesauce. Familiar, untouched by the things pressing in on my world. I followed Tess to the kitchen, the muffins already forgotten in my hands. She's been drawing like crazy since Miles and Elise visited last weekend, Tess said, opening the fridge for oat milk. They brought her a storybook about building your dream home. Got her all excited. I turned, and there it was, a piece of construction paper stuck with a glitter magnet, a crayon house, oddly large, with stick figures in front. Ruthie in her pink dress, Miles beside her holding what looked like blueprints, and Elise standing under a sign that read, "Our Big New Home." I stepped closer. My name wasn't there, neither was Tessa's. You like it? Ruthie asked from behind me, her voice so full of joy it nearly split me in half. Uncle Miles said we're gonna live in a house with stairs on both sides. I nodded, unable to speak. Tess didn't notice. She was at the sink, rinsing a sippy cup. She's so easily influenced, honestly. I wish they wouldn't fill her head like that. You know how impressionable she is. Yes, I did. I smiled for Ruthie's sake, stayed for tea, listened to a 5-year-old describe her future in a house that didn't exist. At least not yet. And then I went home with a stomach that felt like it had swallowed stone. That night, I opened my laptop and searched for someone who knew how to find things quietly. I didn't want confrontation. I found a name, sent a message, and added, "Discretion is important. This involves family." Within the hour, I had a response and a first meeting scheduled. I closed the computer and sat back in my chair, the echo of Ruthie's voice still dancing behind my ribs. I'd built a life where children could dream safely. I wasn't about to let someone tear it down while I stood still. He met me at the edge of the park near the old train station, just after dusk. Not dramatic, just conventional. He looked more like a librarian than someone who could trace financial missteps and dig through sealed property records. But that's exactly why I'd chosen him. No ego, no theatrics, just results. He handed me a flash drive. "It's from 3 nights ago," he said. "Phone call between Elise and someone I haven't identified yet. Possibly a legal contact, could be family, but the language is strategic." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I thanked him, slipped the drive into my coat pocket, and walked home with my hands clenched tight. Back at the house, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the study with only the screen of my laptop glowing in the dark. I plugged in the drive and pressed play. Elise's voice came through, calm, clinical, almost smug. She's at that age where things start slipping. It won't be hard to make the case. Just keep the tone sympathetic, concerned, not aggressive. There was a pause. The person on the other end asked something I couldn't make out. No diagnosis yet," she answered. "But she's erratic. Wanders, forgets things. It's enough for the initial filing. Once we have that, we move on the assets." My mouth went dry. Then, as if discussing weekend plans, she continued, "We've already downloaded the documents. The digital signatures are in place. She won't even realize we filed until the notification lands." I stopped the recording. I sat motionless for a long time, the only sound in the room the low hum of the heating vent. Then I opened my estate management portal. 2 logins from an unfamiliar IP, both from last week. 1 download activity, 1 signature recorded, my name signed electronically. But I hadn't opened that document. It was the revised will, a version I hadn't approved, redirecting several assets from Tess and Ruthie to Miles and Elise. I closed the laptop gently. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I'd done enough of both in quieter chapters of my life, and neither had stopped what needed stopping. Instead, I went to the safe, pulled out my original hard copy, and placed it on the desk. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe I was fading, unraveling, drifting. Because now I knew what they were building. and it was my turn to lay the next stone. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, tucked neatly between a grocery store flyer and a charity appeal. No knock at the door, no special delivery, just another piece of mail and a stack of everyday life. But this wasn't everyday life. The envelope bore the seal of the county probate court. My name in all caps, formal, unmistakable. I opened it with steady fingers and read each line twice. Miles Whitmore and Elise Whitmore had filed a petition seeking legal conservatorship over my financial and medical decisions. The language was careful, worded with concern. Recent signs of cognitive decline, irregular financial behavior, emotional instability. It painted a picture I didn't recognize, but they were counting on others to believe it. They had submitted medical inquiries I'd never authorized, claims of missed bills I'd never seen, and a request for immediate temporary authority until a hearing could be scheduled. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. But inside, something sharp and final clicked into place. I closed the letter, walked into the kitchen, and found my old phone book. The one with numbers scribbled in margins, names written in a time when trust wasn't so fragile. Near the back, I found it Loderman Elliott, attorney at law. We'd worked together years ago when I was still drafting commercial zoning plans and arguing with contractors. He never missed a detail. I called the number. The same voice answered, older now but crisp. Elliott, I said. It's Carmen Holstead. I need you, no pleasantries, no catching up. 2 hours later, we were seated in his office, surrounded by thick carpet and the smell of worn leather. I handed him the envelope and waited while he read in silence. When he looked up, I met his soft, I said, because I love them, because I didn't see it coming. He raised an eyebrow. And now, I said, they're going to see what love looks like when it stops being gentle. He leaned back, cracked his knuckles, and smiled. Then let's give them steel. That night, I went home and opened the folder labeled Contingency, the one I'd built quietly after my husband died, just in case. I chose the place. A small cafe on neutral ground where everything smelled like cinnamon and no one raised their voice. Miles arrived first, wearing that jacket I gave him 2 Christmases ago, the one he only brings out when he wants to look reliable. Elise followed, polished as ever, her smile already set before she even saw me. They sat across from me like this was a family brunch. Miles asked about my garden. Elise complimented my earrings. I stirred my tea slowly, letting them circle around whatever it was they thought they needed to say. We've just been worried about you. Miles began, his voice low, almost tender. Some of your recent decisions have been confusing, nodded quickly. There's no judgment, Carmen. We just want to help. We want to make sure you're protected. Protected. I let the word settle in the air between us. They kept speaking. Something about future planning, shared responsibility, peace of mind. They even offered to take some of the workload off my hands, manage bills, handle correspondence, coordinate appointments. Elise reached across the table and touched my hand. I looked at her hand, then at her. You've both done a lot of thinking, I said softly. Made quite a few moves already. Miles shifted. We thought it'd be best to start early. I nodded, took a sip of tea I didn't want, then set the cup down carefully. You know? I said, letting my eyes rest on each of them in turn. I've been recording too. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was instant. Elise's expression cracked just enough for me to see the calculation behind her eyes. Miles opened his mouth, then closed it again. I'm sure you understand. I continued, still calm. When people feel vulnerable, they start protecting themselves in unexpected ways. I stood, picked up my purse, and left the rest of the tea untouched. Outside, the air felt sharp, and for the first time in weeks, I let it fill my lungs all the way. I didn't need to win in that cafe. I only needed to remind them that I wasn't playing checkers. Back home, I unlocked the drawer where I kept the original estate documents and added a new folder beside them labeled Evidence. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. Everything echoed heels on the floor, the shuffle of paper, the careful words lawyers used to say cruel things politely. Miles and Elise sat at the petitioner's table, dressed like model citizens. Elise wore soft gray, her voice when she spoke all concern and compassion. She painted me as scattered, overwhelmed, fragile, woman slipping under the weight of her own independence. But Elliot had prepared me well. When my turn came, I stood with the flash drive in one hand and my original estate documents in the other. I played the recording. I showed the unauthorized access to my accounts. I presented evidence of the forged digital signature. The judge's expression shifted with each piece of evidence. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear, this isn't about my capacity to manage my affairs. This is about my son and daughter-in-law's capacity for deception. Miles looked at his hands. Elise stared straight ahead, her mask finally slipping. When the gavel came down, the petition for conservatorship was not only denied, it was dismissed with prejudice. The judge also ordered an investigation into the unauthorized financial activities and document forgeries. 6 months later, I sit in my study, the same room where I first discovered their betrayal, writing in a new journal. The house is quiet, but it's my quiet now, chosen and protected. Tess visits on Sundays with Ruthie, who still draws houses but now includes everyone she loves in the pictures. She's learned that home isn't about stairs on both sides. It's about who's standing in the doorway to welcome you. Miles and Elise settled out of court. They repaid every penny they'd stolen, plus interest. The restraining order ensures they can't contact me without legal supervision. I've established a new trust, ironclad this time, with Tess as the primary beneficiary and Ruthie's education fully funded. Elliot made sure every signature is witnessed, every document filed, every loophole sealed. Some people might say I was too harsh. That family deserves second chances. But I learned something important: love isn't always gentle, and protection isn't always quiet. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to stop enablement in its tracks, to refuse to be diminished by those who should cherish your strength. The wind still carries that quiet chill in the mornings, but now when I walk past the bakery and down the hill, I walk with my head high. I built this life brick by brick, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take it without a fight.